Holden Wainwright stepped out of his sleek black car, the sound of laughter and chatter following him like a loyal shadow. His entourage, a group of equally privileged friends, surrounded him, their faces lit with excitement and expectation. They walked through the gates of Crestwood Academy, a place where the elite gathered, and where Holden felt like a king. He was used to being the center of attention, the one everyone looked up to and envied. But today, there was something in the air that felt different, almost electric. As they made their way to the main building, Holden's sharp eyes scanned the courtyard. He spotted Arthur Jenkins, the school janitor, pushing a cart filled with cleaning supplies. Arthur was often overlooked, a mere ghost among the vibrant students. But for Holden, he was an easy target. A smirk formed on his lips as he turned to his friends. "Hey, look, there's our beloved janitor," he shouted, his voice dripping with mockery. Laughter erupted from his group, a sound that echoed against the brick walls. Holden marched closer, his heart racing with the thrill of his own arrogance. "Hey, Arthur, how's it feel to be the school's trash collector?" He pointed at the cart, his eyes sparkling with cruel delight. The laughter grew louder, filling the space with scorn. Arthur paused, his face paling as the words hit him. He looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "I'm just doing my job, Holden," he replied quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "Your job? Oh, please," Holden continued, his tone mocking. "You should be grateful we even notice you. What would you do without us rich kids here to keep you entertained?" He laughed, and his friends joined in, their laughter a cacophony of privilege and contempt. The air around them thickened with tension. Some students looked away, while others stared in shock. The thrill of the moment began to fade for Holden as he noticed the horror etched on the faces of his peers. His laughter died in his throat, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a flicker of doubt. Was this who he wanted to be? But before the thought could settle, he brushed it aside, choosing instead to bask in the temporary high of his power. Arthur's face burned with shame, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He turned away, hastily pushing his cart toward the nearest exit. Holden watched him go, a strange feeling creeping in, something that felt like regret, but he quickly dismissed it. After all, he had a reputation to uphold. "Let's go grab some coffee," he said, trying to shake off the moment. His friends eagerly agreed, and they moved on, leaving Arthur behind, a casualty of their cruelty. As they walked away, Holden's laughter echoed in the halls, but deep down, a small part of him felt heavy. He glanced back one last time, catching a glimpse of Arthur's slumped shoulders retreating into the shadows. The image lingered in his mind, a whisper of something unsettling. What was it that had just happened? Why did he feel a pang of something akin to guilt? He shook his head, dismissing the thought. "It's just a joke," he reassured himself, trying to justify his actions. But as the day unfolded, the weight of the moment began to settle, casting a shadow over his usual confidence. In the hallways of Crestwood Academy, the laughter continued, but for Holden, the echo of his words lingered, a haunting reminder of the cruelty that privilege could bring. Would he always be the arrogant heir, or was there something more beneath the surface? The question hung in the air, unanswered and waiting, just as the next moments of his life would unfold, leading him down an unexpected path. After the brutal incident in the school hall, Holden Wainwright found himself unable to escape the haunting images of Arthur Jenkins. Each night, as he closed his eyes, the shadows of his actions replayed in a series of unsettling nightmares. In these dreams, Arthur stood before him, his face a mix of shame and sorrow, echoing the pain that Holden had caused. The weight of his cruelty felt heavy on Holden's chest, leaving him restless and anxious. In one particularly vivid dream, Arthur's voice rang out, "Why do you hate me so much, Holden?" The words felt like daggers, piercing through Holden's facade of confidence. He awoke with a start, drenched in sweat, his heart racing. The dream brought back memories of his own childhood, of lonely days spent in the shadow of his parents' indifference. His mother, always preoccupied with her social calendar, and his father, wrapped up in his business, had left little room for warmth or affection. As dawn broke, Holden sat on the edge of his bed, staring blankly at the wall. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust particles in the air, but it did little to brighten his spirits. He recalled the moments when he had tried to impress his parents, only to be met with cold smiles and dismissive comments. "You need to be better, Holden," his father would say. "People expect greatness from you." The pressure to excel had twisted into a need for validation, leading him to the very arrogance that had now isolated him. At school, the atmosphere felt different. His friends, once eager to bask in his confidence, began to drift away. Their laughter turned into whispers, and he could feel their eyes on him, judging. "What's wrong with Holden?" one girl whispered during lunch. "He seems different lately." Their words stung, and he felt a pang of loneliness that he had never experienced before. He wanted to reach out and explain, but the thought of opening up terrified him. One afternoon, while walking through the empty corridors, Holden encountered Mr. Thompson, a teacher known for his thoughtfulness. Mr. Thompson stood by the window, gazing out at the schoolyard. He turned as Holden approached, sensing the boy's turmoil. "Holden, I've been meaning to talk to you," Mr. Thompson said gently. "I saw what happened the other day. It was painful to watch." Holden shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean to. I just thought it would be funny," he stammered, avoiding the teacher's gaze. "Funny?" Mr. Thompson echoed, his brow furrowing. "Sometimes we don't realize the weight of our words. They can carry more power than we intend. Have you thought about how Arthur felt?" Holden clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Why should I care? He's just a janitor," he snapped, but deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Mr. Thompson sighed, his expression softening. "Everyone has their story, Holden. We all have our struggles. Arthur may clean the floors, but that doesn't make him any less human than you or me." The teacher's words struck a chord within Holden. He wanted to argue, but found himself at a loss for words. The truth was, he felt trapped by his own actions and the persona he had created. "What if I can't change?" he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can," Mr. Thompson replied firmly, "but it takes courage to confront who you are and who you want to be. Reflect on this. Maybe you'll find a way to be better." As Holden walked away, the weight of Mr. Thompson's words lingered in his mind. He felt a flicker of hope mixed with uncertainty. Could he really change? The thought was both frightening and liberating. That night, as he lay in bed, the nightmares returned. But this time, they felt different. Instead of Arthur's face filled with contempt, he imagined the boy's quiet resilience, the strength that came from enduring hardship. Holden realized he had a choice to make. Would he continue down the path of arrogance, or could he find a way to acknowledge his mistakes and seek redemption? The answer felt elusive, but for the first time, he was willing to try. As the days passed, Holden Wainwright found himself fixated on the small leather-bound diary he had stumbled upon in the dusty corner of the school library. It felt like a secret he should not have discovered, yet it sparked a flicker of curiosity within him. The diary belonged to Arthur Jenkins, the quiet janitor who was often invisible to the students. Holden's heart raced as he opened it, revealing pages filled with poetry, dreams, and reflections that painted a vivid picture of Arthur's inner world. Each word seemed to leap off the page, speaking of beauty and struggle. Arthur wrote about the colors of the sunset, the laughter of children, and the hope that flickered even in the darkest times. Holden read about Arthur's dreams of becoming a writer and how he found solace in words during his lonely nights. Why did I never see this side of him? Holden murmured to himself, a sense of shame creeping in. He felt a pang of empathy for the janitor, realizing that beneath the surface of his job was a man filled with thoughts and feelings, just like anyone else. It struck him that Arthur was not just a janitor. He was a dreamer, much like Holden wished he could be. Determined to learn more about Arthur, Holden began to observe him closely. Each day, he would find a spot near the cafeteria where he could see Arthur at work. The janitor moved with a quiet grace, sweeping the floors and cleaning tables as if he were performing a delicate dance. Students passed by, barely acknowledging his presence, but Holden saw the resilience in Arthur's actions. One afternoon, Holden gathered the courage to approach the janitor. "Hey, Arthur," he called out, trying to sound casual. Arthur looked up, his eyes widening in surprise. I just wanted to say, I saw your diary." Arthur's expression shifted from surprise to caution. "You shouldn't have been looking at that," he replied softly, a hint of defensiveness in his voice. I know, Holden rushed to explain, "but it was really beautiful. I didn't mean to invade your privacy. I didn't know you felt that way about things." Arthur hesitated, clearly unsure of how to respond. "Most people don't care about my feelings," he said quietly, looking down at the floor. "Maybe they should," Holden suggested, surprising himself with his own words. "You have a talent, Arthur. Your writing, it's powerful. You see the world differently." Arthur glanced up, his expression a mix of disbelief and guarded hope. "You really think so?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, I really do," Holden affirmed, feeling a warmth spread in his chest. "I mean, I know I haven't treated you well in the past. I'm sorry for that." Arthur nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the floor. "It's easy to forget people like me," he replied, "but I keep trying. I have to." Holden felt a surge of admiration for Arthur's determination. "Can I read more of your poetry?" he asked, surprising both himself and Arthur. "Maybe," Arthur said hesitantly, "but it's personal. It's not just words. It's my life." "I get that," Holden replied earnestly, "but I want to understand. You've opened my eyes to things I never noticed before. I want to learn from you." Arthur studied Holden's face, searching for sincerity. After a long pause, he finally nodded. "Okay, if you promise to keep it between us." "I promise," Holden said, a smile breaking across his face. For the first time, he felt a connection with Arthur that went beyond their previous encounters. As they talked, Holden felt a shift within himself. The weight of his previous actions began to press down on him, but instead of feeling suffocated, he felt a strange sense of relief. Confronting Arthur had opened a door for him, one that led to understanding and, perhaps, a chance for redemption. From that day on, Holden sought to know more about Arthur, not just as the janitor, but as a person with dreams and struggles. With each conversation, he uncovered layers of Arthur's life, which began to chip away at the arrogance that had long defined him. The hidden talent of the janitor was slowly becoming a beacon of hope for Holden, illuminating a path he never knew he needed to follow. The school buzzed with excitement as the day of the event arrived. Posters hung on the walls, announcing Arthur Jenkins' poetry reading. Students whispered in groups, their skepticism evident. Some mocked the idea of a janitor sharing his work, while others shrugged it off as another boring school activity. Holden Wainwright felt a knot in his stomach, a mix of anticipation and dread. He stood in front of the stage, fingers tapping nervously against his phone, unsure of how to react. "Can you believe they actually let him speak?" One of his friends, Tyler, scoffed, leaning against the wall. "What's next? The lunch lady reciting Shakespeare?" Holden forced a laugh, but inside, he was struggling with the tension that hung in the air. He could not shake the memory of Arthur's hidden diary, the words that had revealed a depth to the janitor he had never expected. As the moment drew closer, he found himself glancing at Arthur, who stood off to the side, looking calm yet nervous. "Why do you care so much about this?" Tyler nudged Holden, noticing his distraction. "He's just a janitor. It's not like he's going to impress anyone." "Maybe he will," Holden replied, surprising even himself with the weight of his words. "Maybe he has something important to say." When it was time for Arthur to take the stage, the room fell silent. The audience watched as he approached the microphone, his hands slightly trembling. He looked out at the sea of faces, and for a moment, he appeared hesitant. But then, he took a deep breath and began to read. In shadows where dreams are born, I find the light that keeps me warm. His voice was soft, yet powerful, echoing through the room. Holden felt the energy shift as the students leaned in, captivated by Arthur's words. Each line painted a picture of struggle and hope, revealing the beauty of life even in the face of hardship. The audience, once skeptical, now hung on every syllable. Though the world may call me trash, I rise above the noise and clash. Holden's heart raced as he listened. He could see the faces of his classmates change, their expressions softening as they began to understand. The judgment that had once been there faded, replaced by a sense of respect and admiration. He felt a pang of guilt wash over him as he thought about how he had treated Arthur in the past. After Arthur finished, the room erupted in applause. Holden stood frozen, unable to join in at first. He watched as Arthur smiled shyly, his eyes shining with a mix of disbelief and joy. The janitor had transformed from a figure of mockery to a source of inspiration within moments. "Wow, I didn't expect that," Tyler said, his voice filled with surprise. "He was really good." "Yeah," Holden admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "He was." As the applause faded, Holden noticed the shift in his classmates. Conversations buzzed around him, filled with words of admiration for Arthur's talent. He could feel the weight of his previous actions pressing down on him, the realization that he had been part of the problem. "I never knew he could write like that," one girl said to her friend, shaking her head in disbelief. "Me neither," her friend replied. "I guess we never really gave him a chance." Holden's mind raced with thoughts. He had been so caught up in his own arrogance that he had failed to see Arthur's worth. The very person he had ridiculed was now the one who had opened their eyes to a different perspective. As the event came to an end, Holden made his way through the crowd, his heart pounding. He needed to speak to Arthur, to acknowledge the change he had witnessed, not just in Arthur, but in himself as well. He found Arthur standing near the door, still basking in the afterglow of his performance. "Arthur," Holden called out, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Arthur turned, a smile still bright on his face. "Hey, Holden, did you like it?" Holden hesitated for a moment, looking into Arthur's eyes. "I did. I really did. You were amazing up there." "Thanks," Arthur replied, his smile fading slightly. "I didn't think anyone would care to listen." "I'm sorry for how I treated you before," Holden said, the words spilling out. "I was wrong. I didn't see you for who you really are." Arthur looked at him, surprised. "It's okay, Holden. I understand." But for Holden, it was not just okay. It was a turning point, a sign that perhaps, just perhaps, he could change. After the event, the air was thick with emotion. Students buzzed with excitement, but Holden felt a heavy weight in his chest. He had witnessed a change in Arthur, and now he had to face the consequences of his own actions. Guilt gnawed at him, pushing him to find Arthur among the crowd of students. As he spotted the janitor, Holden hesitated. Arthur stood to the side, still clutching the pages of his poem, his face flushed with the thrill of having shared his words. The sight stirred something deep within Holden. He took a deep breath, steeling himself to approach. "Arthur," Holden called out, his voice shaky. The janitor turned, surprise flickering across his features. "Can we talk?" Arthur nodded cautiously, his expression a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. They moved to a quieter corner of the hallway, where the laughter and chatter of their peers faded into the background. Holden rubbed the back of his neck, searching for the right words. I wanted to say I'm sorry," he finally blurted out, his heart racing. "For what I did to you before. It was wrong. I was cruel." Arthur's eyes narrowed slightly, but he maintained his calm demeanor. "You were," he replied softly, "but I appreciate you saying that." Holden felt a pang at Arthur's response. "I didn't realize how much my actions could hurt someone. I was so caught up in myself, in being better than everyone else. He looked down, ashamed. I thought it made me strong, but it only made me weak. Arthur took a moment to consider Holden's words. We all have our battles, Holden. It's easy to forget that sometimes. I've faced my share of challenges too. He paused, his voice steady. But it's not too late for you to change. Holden met Arthur's gaze, surprised by the depth of understanding reflected back at him. Do you really mean that? After everything? Yes, Arthur replied, his voice gentle, yet firm. Forgiveness is a choice we make. It's not about forgetting the past, but about moving forward. Holden felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. I want to move forward, Arthur. I want to be better. I want to learn from this. Arthur smiled faintly, a look of warmth spreading across his face. Then start by being kind to others. It's a small step, but it can lead to bigger changes. Kindness, Holden repeated, testing the word on his tongue. I think I can do that. The two stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their conversation settling around them like a comforting blanket. Holden realized how much he had underestimated Arthur. The janitor was not just a background character in his life. He was a person with dreams, struggles, and a resilience that inspired Holden. What will you do now? Holden asked, curiosity piquing within him. Arthur shrugged. I'll keep writing. It's what I love, and I hope to share more of my work with others. Maybe it will help them see the world differently. I'd like to read more of your poems, Holden said earnestly. I want to understand you better. Arthur's eyes sparkled with a mix of surprise and appreciation. I'd like that too. Maybe we can even work together. You can help me share my words with the school. Holden felt a rush of excitement. Really? You'd want that? Of course, Arthur replied, his smile broadening. You have a voice, Holden. Use it for good. That simple statement ignited a newfound determination in Holden. He was ready to shed the layers of privilege that had once defined him. He wanted to stand up for Arthur, to support him, and help others see the beauty he had found in the janitor's words. Let's do it then, Holden said, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. Let's show everyone that kindness matters. As they shook hands, a bond formed between them, forged in the fires of understanding and forgiveness. In that moment, Holden knew he had taken the first true step on his path to redemption. As the days passed, Holden Wainwright felt a shift within himself. He no longer walked the halls of his school with the same arrogance that had once defined him. Instead, he moved with a newfound sense of purpose, hoping to mend the damage he had caused. He often caught himself glancing toward Arthur Jenkins, the janitor, who was now receiving small nods of respect from some students. It felt like a fresh start for both of them. One afternoon, Holden approached Arthur while he was cleaning the art room. The smell of paint and varnish filled the air. Hey, Arthur, Holden said, his voice steady but soft. Do you have a moment? Arthur looked up, surprised. He wiped his hands on his apron and nodded. Sure, Holden. What's up? I wanted to ask if you'd like to hang out sometime. Maybe we could grab a coffee or something. I'd like to get to know you better, Holden said, unsure of how Arthur would respond. Arthur hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching Holden's face for sincerity. You really mean that? He asked. After everything that happened? Holden felt a pang of guilt at the reminder. Yes, I do. I know I've been a jerk, and I'm really sorry for how I treated you. I want to change that. A small smile crept onto Arthur's face. All right, I'd like that. It's not every day I get asked out for coffee by the heir of the school. His tone was light, but Holden could sense the underlying weight of Arthur's words. As they walked to the nearby cafe, Holden felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He wasn't sure what to expect. Would Arthur be angry? Would he be willing to forgive? The cafe, a cozy spot filled with the sound of chatter and the aroma of fresh pastries, offered a warm atmosphere that eased some of Holden's tension. So, what do you like to do? Holden asked as they settled into a corner booth, a steaming cup of coffee in front of each of them. Arthur took a sip of his drink, his eyes lighting up. I love writing poetry. It helps me express my feelings. What about you? What do you do for fun? Holden shrugged, feeling a little lost. I guess I used to just hang out with my friends and party, but lately I've been thinking a lot about what really matters. It's different now. He paused, searching for the right words. I've realized I want to be more than just a privileged kid. Arthur nodded, understanding. It's never too late to change. Everyone has their struggles. Writing helps me cope with mine. I read some of your poetry, Holden admitted, a hint of admiration in his voice. It's really powerful. I had no idea you felt that way. Thanks, Arthur replied, a bit shyly. It's hard to share those things, but I think it's important. Everyone has a story worth telling. As they talked, Holden felt walls he didn't know he had built begin to crumble. He listened intently as Arthur shared his dreams of becoming a published poet, his eyes shining with passion. The more they conversed, the more Holden admired Arthur's resilience. Later that week, a school assembly reflected the changes taking place within the student body. Arthur was invited to share his poems again, and this time, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Students exchanged whispers, some smiling at Arthur as he took the stage. Holden sat in the front row, his heart pounding. He felt proud to know Arthur, knowing the courage it took for him to share his work. As Arthur spoke, his words resonated deeply with the audience, bringing tears to some eyes and smiles to others. The respect he gained that day was palpable. After the assembly, students approached Arthur, congratulating him and asking for copies of his poems. Holden watched, a sense of joy swelling within him. He knew that the school community was beginning to change, embracing Arthur as an equal. That evening, as Holden and Arthur walked home together, Holden felt a connection he had never experienced before. "Thank you for being patient with me," he said, a genuine smile on his face. "I'm lucky to have you as a friend." Arthur returned the smile, warmth in his eyes. "It's been a journey for both of us, hasn't it? But I believe that every new beginning is worth it." Their laughter echoed through the streets, a sound of hope and understanding, a reminder that true wealth lies not in privilege, but in compassion and recognizing the worth of every person. Share this story if you believe that friendship and understanding can transform lives. Leave a comment about a time when reaching out to someone unexpectedly changed your perspective, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.